Welcome everyone to the webinar. This is Tanmay Mittal, Head IP Solutions India region at Sagacious, signing in to welcome you all to our webinar today on the topic Internationalization of the EU Innovative Companies to India, presented by the Business Support to the EU-India Policy Dialogues, funded by the European Union, Knowledge Partners, EBTC and Sagacious Research. Before I go on to introduce this topic and the esteemed speakers on our session today, I am delighted to welcome all the participants from various countries like Hungary, Germany, Sweden, Italy, Netherlands, Czech Republic, India, and so on. As I always say, your participation is a wonderful encouragement to the efforts and attempt that we are making to raise awareness about internationalization of EU companies to India and IP knowledge that has been honed by Sagacious over several years of working with inventors, R&D organizations, IP departments, and IP law practices. Let me now introduce our speakers. Our first speaker of the session is Joel Fernandez. Joel Fernandez is the project lead Europe for the business support to the EU-India Policy Dialogue project. Joel possesses over 20 years of professional experience with global organizations such as the Government of British Columbia, European Business and Technology Center, World Economic Forum, SR Group, Business France, American Express Bank, and Marriott International. Joel is currently based in the office of Eurochambers in Brussels, Belgium, from where he is responsible to conduct outreach for the project and manage all project activities in Europe. Welcome to the webinar, Joel.
Thank you, Tanmay. Thank you for having me here.
Let me now introduce our next speaker, Hanna Ondakova. Hanna is the head IP with the European Business Technology Center. Hanna has 10 years of cross-functional experience in the field of intellectual property. At EBTC, Hanna coordinates activities of the European Patent Office in India. Hanna also manages Europe-India IP Forum, which provides a platform to address various IPR issues and hence supports internationalization of the European and Indian businesses. Welcome to the webinar, Hanna.
Thank you, Tanmay.
We now have Vivek Singh as the next speaker. Vivek is the head of IP filing and prosecution practice with Sagacious IP. Vivek is practicing IP attorney and patent agent with technical, legal, and business background. In his previous roles, he has worked with organizations like FICCI, Ranbaxy, law firms, besides being founder of a startup later acquired by 1mg.com. In his current role, Vivek is advising startups, SMEs, and corporates on various IP matters. Vivek is Government of India recognized IP facilitator for startups, and he got featured in the IM's list of world's leading patent professionals 2019. He is member of Bar Council of Delhi, Delhi High Court Bar Association, and international associations like APA and INTA. Welcome to the webinar, Vivek.
Thank you, Tanmay. Thank you for your nice introduction. Thank you.
So before we start with the presentations today, let me ask our speakers for their initial remarks on the topic of today's webinar. Let's start with Joel.
Well, thanks, Tanmay. I think we are having a very timely discussion on internationalization of EU innovative companies to India, especially when there is a pandemic or a crisis that is happening on a global scale. What I would like to focus on is the positivity or the opportunity that companies should be looking at because during this particular time, with a quote, I would like to start off my remarks with by the Prime Minister, the first Prime Minister of India, Jawaharlal Nehru, who says, when crisis and deadlocks, when they occur, have at least one advantage, that they force us to think. And today I would like to use this webinar to have EU companies think of their internationalization strategies towards India. And that's the reason why I think this discussion is very timely. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Joel. Now, let me ask Hannah to share her initial remarks.
So as Joel said, these days are very exciting times to enter Indian market from various perspectives, and we will showcase certain indicators why so. Of course, IP generally being considered as a driver for innovation should be part of the discussion when it comes to internationalization of EU companies to India. And this is the aim of my presentation, to showcase that the IP strategy is a valid part of a thought process when a company or a startup thinks about entering the Indian market.
Great, Hannah. We look forward to that. Now I request Vivek to share his views, please.
Yeah, Tanmay. So I think because of the changing dynamics during like these crisis days, so for European SMEs, India is going to be one of the top destinations whenever they'll be thinking for expansion and doing business. And therefore, it might be useful for them to understand the IP regime of India and about the things which they should take care of while thinking of India. So during my presentation, I'll briefly cover some of the important IP aspects which any foreign company should take care of while coming to India.
That's very well put. I believe a lot of our listeners would be interested in knowing that. So thanks, Joel, Hannah, and Vivek for setting the context for this webinar. Before we move ahead, I invite our listeners to keep sharing their questions as and when they have it during the course of the session. They can share their questions via the GoToWebinar question box on the right side of this presentation window. I will pick up on those questions and ask them to our speakers after they finish their brief talks. Also, Sagacious is offering free custom trainings for IP and R&D teams during lockdown as an initiative to support businesses during these crisis times. The participants of these webinars can drop us an email later at webinar@sagaciousresearch.com to get more information or to request a training session for their teams. Without further ado, let us now get started with the main part of our presentation. And for that, let me invite Joel to take us through the first part that helps us understand internationalization of the EU innovative companies to India. Over to you, Joel, now.
Thank you, Tanmay. Welcome everyone to this webinar on internationalization of EU innovative companies to India. Over the next 15 minutes, I would like to share with you the business support to the EU-India Policy Dialogues project, what exactly is the project and how it is supporting EU businesses in their internationalization towards projects and in India, why India is the go-to destination, and why is India the go-to destination in the next 5 years for EU businesses, some of the support initiatives under the Business Support Project, areas of opportunity for EU innovative companies that are extended towards them in India, and some of the upcoming project activities. So the business support to the EU-India Policy Dialogues project is a direct outcome of the new EU strategy on India, which was adopted in December 2018. The project strives to increase business involvement in strategic areas of bilateral cooperation that focuses on the policy dialogues. India and the EU have signed several policy dialogues, and some of the sectors that are under these policy dialogues are on environment, energy, climate change, ICT, and urbanization. There are relevant real-time opportunities under every policy dialogue that is in store for EU businesses that are looking to come to India and work in India. The website of this project is www.euindiabusinesssupport.eu. A lot of information on the policy dialogues and the projects is on our website. We have a consortium of 3 partners, GFA Consulting, which is based in Hamburg, which is the lead partner for the project. EBTC, which is the European Business and Technology Center, which is based in India, is the implementation partner in India. And Eurochambers, which is the Association for Chambers of Commerce in Europe, is the implementation partner in Europe. This project is a 3-year project. It started off in February 2019. and is a 3.8 million euro project. Let me share with you why India and why the next 5 years is crucial for EU businesses. India, as of now, is a $2.7 trillion economy. The government of India foresees India to be a $5 trillion economy by 2025. So there's a lot of infrastructure growth in India, and thus making it also the third largest economy in terms of purchasing power parity in terms of GDP. As you all know, India has a huge population. We are currently at 1.3 billion people, but by 2025, we are going to be a 1.5 billion population. And with an average age of around 29 years by 2025. We are also the third largest consumer economy by 2025. So there's a lot of statistics that are proving that India is going to be on the rise. In any statistics that you look at, India is always in the first 5. And also in terms of startup ecosystem, we have the second largest startup ecosystem with already 26 unicorns. Some of you would already know Swiggy and Paytm and Ola, and all of these startup unicorns are already being very successful in India. In terms of ease of doing business, India ranks 63rd among 190 nations. There has been a surge ever since the last 4 or 5 years that India is picking up on this statistic. Some of the support initiatives under the Business Support Project. One is the EU Excellence in India. It's a task force or a working group of EU champions that have come together that focus on synergy effects among major players and that are committed to set climate and sustainability targets across their value chains. It's a working group that was launched in December last year, and any company that or EU business that is already in India that is committed to climate change and sustainability is more than happy to, they should be joining this initiative or this working group, whereby the project offers them co-creation of ideas, visibility, and other opportunities to work on activities in India. So if there are any companies that are interested whilst listening to this webinar, you can always send us an email at projects@ebtc.eu. The second support initiative is the European Economic Group. The European Economic Group is the single voice for advocacy for EU businesses in India. What we have done is put together a task force or a working group with the respective heads of the bilateral chambers, associations, and embassies. What we discuss once every 2 months are the market barrier issues faced by EU businesses in India, which is then put forth to the government of India, thereby making a very conducive environment for EU businesses to work in India and to do business in India. Again, if there are any EU businesses and they want to be part of this European Economic Group, they should contact their bilateral chambers or their embassies, because we work very closely with all the member states, all the embassies and bilateral chambers that are present in India as part of this European Economic Group. Next is the cluster approach. The Indian government, we have noticed, likes the cluster approach because EU SMEs and companies, when they come to India, they can only solve one part of the problem. So what we have done is put together a working group of stakeholders, both from Europe and India, that focus on the entire value chain, thereby creating a cluster. We also help in terms of enabling them to realize transformational projects across different sectors. There is also stakeholder consultations that happen, as well as engage them with the Indian government and bodies. So there is a huge advantage for EU businesses that are looking to come to India and they would like to be part of a cluster and do business also with the Indian companies. This is a great opportunity for EU businesses under the business support to the EU-India Policy Dialogues project. Next is the India Readiness Toolkit that we are going to launch very soon. What we have noticed is EU businesses, when they think of India, they seem to be very clueless, or they have too much information that they get from different sources. What we try to do is streamline the information into a toolkit which will be published on the website of the project, whereby there is a tool that companies can self-assess themselves in terms of what is the knowledge, or what kind of knowledge do they have on India in terms of IP related issues, in terms of setting up in India, the types of companies, types of partners, types of support systems, type of funding mechanisms. A lot of information is required. So this toolkit will have 3 pillars. One is assess, evaluate, and learn. Under assessment, there will be a questionnaire which will be around 5 or 10 minutes for companies to take. They will get a response, an immediate response, which is of course part of the system or part of the software that we are creating, that they will get a response, that they will know where they stand in terms of percentage of information that they have. And finally, learn, because we will be working with a lot of the business support organizations, chambers of commerce, embassies, consulates, consulting organizations as well, in terms of consultants, to prepare documents for in advance, so companies can read these documents and learn more about India on different sectors, on different topics. So this is a new initiative under the project, which is the India Readiness Toolkit. In terms of launching this, we are looking at somewhere in the month of June to launch the toolkit. And we will be, post the webinar, we will be sending out a questionnaire to the chambers of commerce and the business support organizations in Europe to identify what could be the key questions that their businesses need to know in advance. We have a few already, but we would like to make this a very collaborative approach. So you can be rest assured, if you are a chamber of commerce or a business support organization looking at this webinar or listening to this webinar, you will be contacted soon. Some of the areas of opportunity for EU innovative companies. We have 5 direct real-time opportunities for EU businesses to look at and come to India. Most of these opportunities are projects that are under the policy dialogue. They fall directly under the policy dialogues, where the policy dialogues were launched or signed between the European Union and India in 2016, when Prime Minister Modi met with the European Commission and leaders of the European Parliament and Council. And that's where they signed on these policy dialogues. So there were joint declarations that led to the launch of all these 5 projects. Now, the India-EU Water Partnership is a project which is focusing on water management issues in India. As you all know, India has a lot of water bodies that need cleaning, that have issues in terms of water management, water monitoring. There are several issues in terms of the water sector. So the EU is looking out for technologies within the EU to come together to work on water-related issues in India under this project. A lot of information on this particular project is on the website of the business support to the EU-India Policy Dialogues project, which I mentioned earlier. So if you would like to engage in any of these projects, please let us know. The Clean Energy and Climate Partnership project, again, is a project focusing on the renewable energy sector, whether it is in the sectors of offshore wind, battery storage, energy storage, renewable energy, clean tech. That's the sector that's the project that focuses on these particular topics. The EU-India ICT Standardization Collaboration Project focuses on standardizing and aligning the EU standards with the Indian standards. This project has led to a lot of cooperation and between Europe and India in terms of success stories as well. In India, there are a lot of hackathons that are happening all the time within India under this particular project. So if you are an ICT company, if you're a tech company that is interested in being part of this particular project, you can always let us know and follow us. The India-EU Urban Partnership is a project which focuses on the smart cities between Europe and India. There is a lot of alignment required between a few cities in Europe that have aligned or partnered with a few cities in India. So best practices from these cities in Europe are adopted in a few select cities in India. As you all know, India is looking at creating 100 smart cities, and the EU showcased its technical know-how to the government of India by creating this kind of a partnership. Resource Efficiency Initiative is a project that focuses on the UN sustainability consumption goals of resources for India, because India was looking out for a partner to partner with for its resource efficiency of its materials. And the EU again has adopted this particular initiative so that companies from the EU can focus and enter India directly under these real-time projects in India. So this is what I wanted to share with you in terms of where are these particular opportunities which are real-time for EU businesses. The project also looks at activities during the year. The focus is, of course, on the sectors that are related to the policy dialogues, whether it's energy, environment, ICT, or urbanization. And in the next few months, because of this crisis, we have looked at, this was actually supposed to be a road show. In fact, today we are using this platform as a webinar. So for the next 2-3 months, we are using the webinar platform. We have a lot of webinars lined up where we talk about sector-specific webinars. Today's webinar is more generic. Tomorrow, in fact, I'm doing a webinar with a cluster in Spain, focusing on the water sector. So today I just briefly mentioned to you all about the India-EU water partnership. But tomorrow there is a more detailed presentation and webinar that we are doing, particularly on the EU-India water partnership and the water sector. What I want to bring to you and your notice is the EU Excellence in Europe virtual roundtable. Similar to the EU Excellence in India program, we are thinking of launching a EU Excellence in Europe roundtable or a program which will allow EU businesses that focus on the sustainability and climate change sector to come together and collect that information and consolidate that information for India. And the EU is recognized for its clean technologies and its renewable energy and all of these sectors that really influence sustainability. So we are trying to gather a good critical mass of EU businesses for this particular roundtable. More information will be shared on our website. And if in case you would like to participate in any of the activities or projects of the business support to the EU-India Policy Dialogues project, you can always contact me. With that, I would like to end my presentation with a quote from John F. Kennedy, who is the, of course, the former President of the United States of America. He says, when written in Chinese, the word crisis is composed of two characters. One represents danger and the other represents opportunity. And I would like for everyone who's listening to this webinar to focus on the opportunity aspect of this crisis, because as we all know that, everything will pass and everything changes, and we need to be positive and focus on what will happen post this pandemic. And if we all see positive signs out of it in the future, then you should also be ready for that. So let's use this time to focus, and as Jawaharlal Nehru said, think at this particular time and use this time for our strategies on India. So with that, I would like to thank you. And over to you, Tanmay.
Thanks, Joel. That was great. And thank you for the comprehensive overview. The stats about India are indeed noteworthy. And the EBTC and EEG projects under the EU-India Policy Dialogue are both great initiatives to facilitate business growth. I'm sure our listeners had a good time. Let me now ask Hannah to take us through her Europe-India IP Forum presentation. Over to you, Hannah.
Hi, Tanmay. Thank you very much. So good morning to Europe and good afternoon to our listeners in India. So I represent a company called EBTC aka European Business and Technology Center, and we have been helping European companies to enter Indian market since 2008. And my segment of this webinar would be about, of course, internationalization of European companies and the role of IP. So as Joel said, you know, he already kind of highlighted few of the indicators. Why India and why now? I also listed few indicators for your reference. As Joel said, Indian economy became very recently actually the 5th largest in the world. At the beginning of this year, it jumped over, if I can say that, UK and France. India will be the biggest consuming market by 2020, third biggest consuming market by 2025. And also Indian government would like to reach a target of 5 trillion USD by 2025. With recent economic developments, there was a huge rise in the Indians' new middle class. As Joe also said, and I suppose everybody knows that, India has second largest population in the world. Interesting fact is that 65% of this population is under age of 35, which gives access to a pool of very young, highly skillful and English-speaking labor force. In terms of innovation, since 2016, when India government has published new IPR policy, there has been massive development in the IPR space in India, both on the front of government support and implementation of government bodies, but also support in terms of startups, academia, IPR awareness, etc. And of course, this development is reflected in a global innovation index, where India jumped around 5 places to 52nd place out of 57 in 2019. As Joel said, the growth in key sector is driven by public sector. He kind of narrated what's happening in India in those sectors, and I don't think I should repeat it. So although there are a lot of opportunities in India, there are indeed a lot of challenges which European companies have to face when entering market and which they have to consider when coming to India. One of them is local legislation and regulation. I think India traditionally might have a bit of reputation of bureaucratic country. So indeed, the legislation and regulation are rather complex, and the companies must have suitable local assistance to address these issues. Another one is a product and service adaptation to meet local needs. This is a rather interesting point. I give you example of McDonald's, for instance. McDonald's became actually very successful in India after they introduced amended menu to, to appeal to Indian taste. So there is definitely certain aspect depending on the services and products you want to bring to India to consider. India is indeed very cost sensitive country. So when you're entering the country, giving the size of the market and size of the population, it gives immense opportunity of scaling up. Having said that, one has to be definitely cautious how you price your products and services. Again, I would give example of giants such as Uber or Spotify or Netflix, which have lower prices for the services in India than anywhere else in the world. Having said that, the market share and the number of users they have, it's of course pretty large. The most important point I'd like to actually talk about is, of course, IP strategy, because this is the core of my presentation. European companies definitely have to be aware about suitable IP protection, means of enforcement, the IPR issues which are in India to generally mitigate the IPR risks. So if you say, Hannah, what actually IP strategy is and why do I as a company need it? because many of you might have, already existing businesses in Europe. Some of you might not have actual IPR protection in Europe. So why is so essential that you have to have it in India? Generally speaking, IP strategy is the course of actions which identifies your IPR assets to drive innovation, keep the competitive advantage, obtain financial gains, if possible, whilst mitigating the risks of infringement. So what does it actually mean? First of all, we have to, as a company, as an institution, identify what is your IP. I think generally there is a misconception that IP equal patents, which is not actually entirely true. Of course, patents are very valid and a very strong part of the IP protection, but we can also protect our trademark, our designs, we can protect sounds as a part of the trademark, we can have geographical indications, we can have trade secret, we can have copyrights, etc. So there is a wide range of rights which you can have protected in India. So once I identify what is the core of my, I don't want to say business, but what is, the essential attribute connected to my company, I can try to protect it. So all applications for these various rights are filed at Indian Patent Office. There, since 2016, when the policy was issued, there have been huge changes, positive changes at the Indian Patent Office, and the speed of the granting patent applications have decreased from number of years to 2 to 3 years, which is at the moment in the par with the Western counterparts like European Patent Office. There will be aspect, I think Vivek might mention later, where Indian government, since they try to support innovation, particularly for startups which are younger than 5 years, they have initiatives where you can have your patent granted within a year, for instance. Another aspect which one has to consider when entering the market, it's actually what's already existing in there. I think this is in particular for the patents. I would like to mention that when I am filing a patent, it's a geographically limited right, meaning if I have a patent in my home country or in Europe, the patent is not valid in India. So if I want to come to India with my product or with my service, I need to look who has what patented in the country, because I might be unwillingly or unknowingly infringing on somebody else. So in a patent world, we call this exercise freedom to operate, where we check already existing documents or already existing patents, and according that we can say whether you as a company, when coming with your products, are not infringing on somebody else. Also, this gives you opportunity to see where are the space for expansion, let's say. So this is very kind of interesting tool how to use it for your own IP strategy, but also for the business monitoring. And least at last, to link your IP strategy to business objective. I think, again, traditionally IP was considered as a cost. But these days, with the globalization and commercialization, there are a lot of means to use your IP and leverage it as a money generating, as a revenue generating asset. So from the business perspective, I think one has to ask, am I a company just which wants to file the IP to protect it and would not allow anybody to else use my technology, offensive strategy? Or am I a company which, if I have my IP, I monitor the market, I see the competitors, and if they use my technology or my trademarks, whatever it is, I enforce my rights and, let's say, sue them or stop them by the courts? Or am I a company which has a number of IPs and they look for collaboration partners and use my IP to commercialize it or to franchise my services, etc., to generate money? So I think generally the IP strategy should be such where you can use aspect of 3 of them. You monitor your competitors, you look for collaboration partners, and you protect your IP. So just to kind of quickly mention, since we talk about the strategy and why should I have it, to actually mitigate the risks and what are the IPR risks in India. As I said, patent infringement. So patent infringement actually is not just copying, but is also importing, selling your product without the permission of you as a patent holder. As I said, the patent is restricted to the where you have your application filed. So if you have a European application, there is not much you can do if you don't file it in Europe and you want to, stop somebody from manufacturing or selling your products in India. That's why it's really necessary to kind of have your patents granted or have your patents filed in the place where you also want to conduct your business. Trademark infringement, again, unauthorized use of trademark or services which might confuse the buyer and deceive the buyer that they are buying something what is actually not your product. Counterfeiting and piracy are unfortunately really big problem in India. Counterfeiting, as per the European reports, were worth 121 billion euro from the third world countries, which include also India. Piracy, downloading and distributing copyrighted content, as per the Indian government, was worth $2.8 billion. So you can see these are very huge numbers, and of course, without the protection, it becomes rather difficult to stop the infringers. To kind of, I don't want to say end on the good note, how EBTC can help you, when you want to internationalize in India. So first of all, we have a platform which is called European Technology Engagement Cell, which provides platform for European companies where you can log in on the link below and showcase your technology. Our Indian partners are part of this platform, and they kind of can get in touch with the European partners. On the IP front, we are providing support in terms of IP awareness, where we help Indian and European companies to address the various issues they might have in terms of awareness, what are the patentability issues, etc. IP support, advisory for market entry, how to generate your IP, how to maintain your IP assets. And the last and least is the commercialization. When me as a company, I'm ready to commercialize my patent portfolio, we can help to address, help to find partners who can license the technology from you. As the EBTC, we also offer collaboration through various pillars. One is the project pillar, from the project facilitation, structuring, pilot project, cluster approach, which Joel was talking about earlier, to advisory. Again, IP Forum is one of those initiatives, different technology transfer, again, getting in touch with public projects and investment. And this is last page is the stakeholder engagement from the project which EBTC is working on. So I hope you enjoyed my presentation, and you will consider IP as an essential as an essential item when entering India. And on these lines, well, thank you very much. And on these lines, I pass word back to Tanmay.
Thanks, Anna, for this insightful coverage. It was great to know that India jumped 5 places on the Innovation Index.
Yes,
And
yes,
I'm
there has
sure
been.
that, yeah, and hence a robust IP strategy becomes much more relevant and necessary in this present scenario. Since IP is a territorial right, as you mentioned, let me now invite Vivek to share his presentation. He has more on-ground experience with the Indian patent offices and various industry associations. Over to you, Vivek.
Thank you, Tanmay. Thank you. And a warm hello to all the participants. Allow me a second so that I can showcase my presentation. Tanmay, can you please pass on the control to me? Yeah. Thank you. So I hope it is visible to everyone. So in the next 15 minutes, I'll briefly cover three aspects primarily. So number one is I'll give you the scenario of the overall Indian IP regime along with some of the recent developments. Point number two, I'll be talking about some of the requirements, timelines, and processes involved in protecting and enforcing IP rights in India. And the third and most important is to talk about some of the important aspects which one should consider while entering Indian market. So if you're planning to do business in India, or if you are already there, so it is essential to know how to use and safeguard and enforce your IP rights that your business may own. So if you listen carefully, so you'll be able to develop a fair understanding on the pointers which should be there at least in your strategy roadmap for India. So in order to first, I'll be talking about the overall IP regime of India along with some of the recent developments. So in order to better understand it and to have a better clarity, so Indian IP regime can be divided into two parts. The first, the pre-IP policy framework time, and the second, the post-IP policy framework. So as you may be aware, like India announced its well-defined IPR policy in 2016. So in the pre-IP policy framework, there were like certain gaps, like there were like slow processing of the applications before the Indian patent offices, along with the courts were very slow in disposing of the matters. There were like laws and acts which were required to be amended, and the overall administration system was not so much efficient. And it used to take around 5 to 10 years to get a final decision in any patent matter, and 2 to 4 years in any trademark matter. But now in the post IP policy framework, so most of the things have been like refined and improved. So now we have got patents granted in just less than 9 months, so which is I think fastest anywhere in the globe. Trademarks are now being registered in less than 5 months time, so which is amazing. So if I'll be talking about the post IP policy framework, so overall India has a well-defined and well-established and up-to-date statutory and administrative procedures, as well as a good judicial IP framework. So coming to the specifics now, so as you may be aware, like India has 4 patent offices based in Calcutta, Delhi, Chennai, and Mumbai. There are 5 trademark registries. The 4 are common, like Calcutta, Delhi, Chennai, and Mumbai, plus 1 in Ahmedabad. Copyright registry is based in Delhi. Design wing is based in Calcutta, and GI registry is based in Chennai. And now let's look at like which are the important treaties to which like India is a signatory. So first one is the Paris Convention for patents and design primarily, and for PCT for patents, Madrid Protocol and Paris Convention for TMs, and recently India has also signed agreements like Nice and Vienna Agreement for trademarks. India is also part of Berne Convention for copyrights. Coming to the judicial system, so India has IPAB, Intellectual Property Appellate Board, to challenge the patent, like orders from the patent offices. And infringement suits can be filed at district court level or at the high court level. And we have now commercial courts established under the high courts. India has well-defined like alternate dispute resolution mechanisms. So arbitration and mediations as the alternate dispute resolution mechanisms are available for IP owners to resolve disputes. And it should be taken care of, like you have a specific clause incorporated in your contracts so that you can opt for arbitration and mediation in case there is any dispute. And all the laws, most of the IP laws and rules got amended very recently. You can see like most of the amendments have been done in 17, 18 and 19, and even some are in the pipeline. So now let's look at like which are the some significant changes which have been done and made in the Indian IP regime in last few years. I'll say the post IP policy era. So after 2016, you can see like all the acts and rules got amended. Number one. Number two, Copyright Office is now merged with IP Office, like the main patent office, and Copyright Board is merged with IPAB. Earlier, these used to be under the Ministry of Human Resources and Development. Now, hearing can be done via video conferencing, so no need to travel to patent offices. A lot of patent and trademark examiners have been recruited. So like, there is no at all pendency in terms of trademarks. For patents, there are pendency got decreased, and it will be like all the backlog will be cleared by early next week or by end of this year. Sorry, not week, this year. And recently, India has given accession to NICE and VENA agreements for trademarks and Locarno agreement for designs. So now coming to the most important part, and like which are the things which you should take care of while protecting your applications, either the trademark or patents in India. So for patent applications, you can opt for three routes. One is the Paris Convention route, and you can file your application within 12 months from the filing in your original country. And you can also opt for PCT, and then in that case, you have to file the application within 31 months. India is a 31-month country. And you can also opt for direct filing. But in that case, you have to take a foreign filing permission from your local patent office. And third and most important, last and fourth one is the important thing which you should consider. You can opt for fast track examination if you are fulfilling the criteria. And the criteria is if you file a PCT application in your home country and you are making India as the ISA or IPEA, in International Preliminary Examining Authority or Searching Authority, or both, then you can opt for fast track examination. And the second criteria is if you are a startup or a small entity, and these both criteria are open for foreign applicants also. So if you are falling in the criteria defined by the Ministry of Commerce and Industry, and as well as Ministry of medium, small, and micro entities, you can apply under startup or MSME category. Coming to the trademarks, so trademark can be filed via two routes. Number one is the direct filing, which is the economical way, and the second one is the Madrid application. But in that case, you have to file the application within 6 months from filing in Europe or any other country. And trademark can be filed under two categories. Like it can be filed as a proposed to be used, wherein you don't need to provide any user details. And second is like already the trademark application is already in use, and in that case you have to provide the user details. And the most important thing is India has now a well-known trademark registration process. So if you have a trademark which has some trans-border reputation, so you can apply for registration under the well-known trademark category. The only difference is you will have to pay additional fee, a higher official fee, and a lot of documentation would be required. But if you will be able to get your trademark registered under the well-known category, so your trademark is protected in all the 45 categories. So that is very important. So if your trademark is having a reputation in Europe or any other country, So you can consider filing your trademark under the well category. Design, you can if you want to claim the priority, you have to file within 6 months, and then you will be able to register it for 10 years, and you can renew it for another 5 years. Copyright is like automatic. You can get like registration is just optional, but in case you will be able to file it and register it, it's a good idea, because in that case you will be able to prove your ownership in case there is a criminal proceeding against the infringer. So it's advisable to file a copyright application also. Now coming to the enforcement part. So both the civil as well as criminal remedies are available for enforcing your rights, but only civil remedies are available for patents and design, and criminal remedies are also available under the Copyright and Trademark Acts. Now let's quickly look at some of the important things which one should consider before coming to India. So one is like India doesn't provide protection for utility models. So this is almost the same scenario as in Europe, but if you have filed and registered your utility model in other countries, so India is not like allowing the utility model protection. Second, you can opt for fast track examination. I have already discussed about it. Third is the unique foreign filing requirement. So if you have any inventor, because India is going to be a center for research and development and manufacturing, so maybe you will have to engage Indian inventors. And if you will be filing your application and any Indian inventor is there who is resident of India, then you cannot apply directly to any other country before filing it in India. But if you wish to do so, you have to take permission from the Indian Patent Office. And then you can directly file in any other country of interest. But in that case, you have to take permission from the Indian Patent Office. And the third one is there are like unique sections like section 3D for pharma related inventions and section 3K for computer related inventions. So there are certain criteria which should be taken care of if your inventions are falling under these sections 3D and 3K. And before filing it in India, it's advisable to go for a different or a unique patentability search focus for India, because your invention might be patentable in countries like Europe and US and Canada, but may not be patentable in India. So it's good to go for a separate patentability search focus for India only. And FTO. So in India, there is no drug patent linkage. So maybe you can get approval from the authorities, from the drug authorities, but you'll not be able to launch your product because there are patents. So it's good to have FTO search done by Indian IP experts. There is another unique requirement called booking of the patents under Form 27. So you have to, every year at the end of financial year, you have to submit like if your invention or the patent has been worked in India or not. So this is a regular requirement. And if you are not fulfilling, so there are fines and your patent get revoked also. Another unique requirement is Form 3, wherein if there are other foreign equivalents of your applications in India, so you have to regularly update Indian Patent Office about the changes in your applications. So in case there is any change in your application, in case there is any office action or rejection, or if you have filed any application in any other country, so you have to regularly inform Indian Patent Office about the changes. And if your business or the company registration is also going to happen in India, so it's better to do ROC check in parallel to the trademark search, because in India, ROC, like the registrar of the company, and trademark registry are not linked. So they are functioning independently. So your company and your trademark, if both are same, so maybe ROC will allow for the registration of your company, but uh, trademark office may deny, and vice versa. So it's better to have both checked before application. And TMs registered within, like trademarks are registered within 5 to 6 months, so it's quite fast. But if you want to go for a fast track examination, then you can apply for TM, and then you can like get your trademarks registered in less than 5 to 6 months. Design registration is quite simple and very fast, so you should consider registering your designs also. And copyright registration, like I said, is important and advisable in case you will be initiating any infringement suit against the infringer. Sixth is, like, there is no codified trade secret law in India. So it's better to have unique sections and clauses in your employee agreements, in your NDAs, in your confidentiality agreement. So in case there is any IP generated out of the employment time or the duration, so there should be a clause like all the IP rights are automatically assigned to the company. So you should be careful about it. And in case you are dependent upon someone else IP, like who is like Indian IP, or who is having Indian IP, so it's better to conduct an IP audit and IP due diligence to check the strongness and validity of all those IP rights. So this was all about from my side. Thank you so much. Over to you, Tanmay.
Thanks, Vivek. It was quite motivational to know that Indian IP offices have expedited the process immensely. Getting a patent granted in 9 months is definitely encouraging for companies to file in India. So all these speakers have covered a lot of ground on this topic, and I'm sure audience must be having a lot of questions. I have received a few, and the first question is for Joel. Do you think COVID-19 will significantly impact investments into India from the EU?
Thank you, Tanmay. Thanks for the question. But before I answer your question, I would like to thank all the partners that have supported this webinar, in particular Sagacious IP, who has been our knowledge partner, the German India Startup Exchange Program, GINSEP Startup Campus, Signtech, Hungarian Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and the Hungarian Export Promotion Agency. Thank you, everyone, for supporting this webinar. On behalf of the business support to the EU-India Policy Dialogues Project and the European Union, I would like to thank you for that. Now, to answer your question, yes, it is going to have a tremendous impact on trade globally, on investment globally. But having said that, not all, since it's a global pandemic, I understand that, but not all EU member states were or are highly impacted. There are few that are very highly or severely impacted, and there are few that are not so severely impacted. So it also depends on the member state. Second of all, it is also in terms of short-term, medium-term, and large-term impact. If you look at it in the short term, I can see that it's going to considerably we won't see any huge investments from the European Union into India in the short term. I'm talking about in the next 3 to 4 months. But having said that, if you look at the medium term and the long term, yes, I see things opening up. There are member states that are already starting to open up their economies and sort of end the lockdown in their member states or in their respective member states. So it's going to be, I'm talking more on the medium term and long term, there might be a positive change towards this. And the whole idea of having this webinar today is to focus on the medium to short to long term and develop those strategies for India. And that's exactly what I wanted to share with you through the webinar, and that's exactly what this business support to the EU and the policy dialogue wanted to do today through this webinar, is to help the EU businesses to use this time to focus on their strategies in the medium term and long term, because as we all know, we also had a similar crisis, which was more of an economic crisis in 2008. But when the markets opened up, when the economy started to sort of better themselves, companies were still lagging behind because they had not utilized that time in focusing on their strategies for internationalization. So my point being is, use this time. We have this crisis going on. Look at it as an opportunity but at the same time look towards India in the medium to long term, because that's where the opportunities exist. And there is, of course, support from the European Union and projects like ours to support you. Thank you.
Thank you, Joel. So to all our listeners, we understand that we have overshot the time. We still have more questions from the participants to answer, so we would be taking that up now. The next question is for Hannah. Hannah, you mentioned in your presentation that there are a lot of things to consider for businesses when they are planning for India. So what is a must for these businesses to consider when entering India?
See, I generally think that they have to, of course, consider what is their core business, what could be the potential IPR violation, and how to mitigate it. So, really setting up the strategy, talking to lawyers before they come here, both on the European side and also Indian side. So their expectations and their budgeting and their vision, how they want to proceed in India should be met. So it's just about, what you have, what you can avail, and how you can avail to the best. And of course, if there are risks which can be mitigated, the way how to do it. Yeah. And I think I spoke about it in detail in my presentation. So it's, yeah. So I think this is all what I can add now.
Great, great. Thank you. The next question is addressed to Vivek. Vivek, how much does it cost to get a patent granted or a trademark registered in India?
Okay, so India is like quite economical as compared to US and Europe. So just to give some ballpark sort of figure, so in order to get a patent granted or finally disposed of, it will not cost you more than 1500 USD to 2000 USD at max. And I'm considering all the office actions and everything, all the official fees. So for a figure of around 1500 USD, if you are getting a patent in India, which is a very important destination, so you can like opt for. For trademark, it can be as low as, let's say, not more than 25,000 rupees, Indian rupees at max, including the official fee and everything. So that's quite reasonable. So for a 500 USD, if you are getting your trademark registered in India, so that's quite reasonable.
Great. Thank you, Vivek, for that answer. The next question is again for Joel to answer. Why do EU companies go to China before India? That's an interesting question. Do you see any new trends there?
Well, yes, I do see a few developing trends. Well, of course, the infrastructure that was available in China was tremendous as compared to India, but India has now, in the last 5 or 6 years, proven that it is worth its salt, and it has opened up its economy. There are different policy and regulations that have been updated in India and changed for the betterment of international investment into the country. So I see that there is now a trend where technologies are also looking at India as a launch pad, much more than China. So it depends on what exactly is the technology, what is the kind of relationship that the EU business already has with India, or if there is a solution and there is a demand in India more than that of China, I'm sure India would, also be equally competitive with China on that front. So it really depends on what exactly is the strategy of the EU business, whether it is looking at China first or India first, doesn't really matter. It all matters as to how they can be successful in that particular country.
Thank you. That makes sense, Joel. Another question. What IPR risks EU companies might face in India? Hannah, could you please answer that?
So I did cover in my presentation as well, but I think primarily it's regarding patent infringement. And this is what generally European companies really struggle with. I again have to highlight that sometimes particular SMEs who might not be that IP savvy, they might have patents or not in their home countries, and then they find out that the technology is copied in India, and then obviously without the patent filing here, it's slightly difficult to stop the infringer. So again, coming back to whatever I was saying before, everything comes in circles, so without the IP protection, it's kind of a little bit difficult to stop the infringers. So as I said, the patent infringement is, I would say, the most pinching issue, followed by the trademarks and, piracy and copyright violation. So yeah.
Yes, and with the patent offices being expedited in India, we can expect quick resolutions to that as well.
Yeah, definitely. And also on that front, there have been improvements in terms of enforcement. We have not covered enforcement part in this presentation much because that goes a little bit out of the scope. But there have been also improvement at the fronts of how the courts are dealing with the IPR cases and the speed how they dispose the IPR cases, particularly the High Court here in Delhi.
Great,
Yes,
great.
Hannah, right.
So on this, I have one more question for Vivek. And Vivek, the question is, what is the scope of software patenting in India?
Okay, so software patenting is a bit gray area, but because of the recent ruling from the Delhi High Court given by Justice Pratibha Singh, so it's quite clear now. So as like you may assume, like Section 3K doesn't allow a computer program per se or the algorithm to be patentable, but this judgment, the recent judgment of Delhi High Court given in December 2019. It says that if your invention or the software is showing some sort of technical advancements, which could be in the form of higher speed of the overall system and more economical use of the memory. So there are 7 8 criterias like which are defined in terms of examples. So if your software is giving any sort of better output, so then this is a like area which can be get a patent in India. So it's now clarified and it's not no more a gray area. But again, yeah, it will take time to get some more court orders and some patent offices orders to get better clarity on it. But it's almost clarified. Like if you have your software is giving some technical advancements, so it will qualify to get a patent in India.
Thank you for that response, Vivek. My next question from the listeners is for Joel. Joel, do you have any tips for the EU companies in creating their investment strategy for India?
Sure. India, as we all said, is a dynamic market. We need to look at India in the first place. The second is look and find your trusted partner in India. Most EU companies try to cut corners in terms of doing due diligence on companies in India. It's always good to do a good, proper, sound due diligence on your future partner in India. Have a long-term horizon. If you are looking at coming into India and making profits in the short term, I'm talking about 1 to 2 years, is could be a dream. But if I'm talking about more to 3 to 5 years is what the horizon should be in terms of your investment into India, and that's only when you will break even. Of course, it depends on the technology and it depends on the company, and it also depends on your partner. Do a lot of homework, work with your consulate or embassy or with the EU and other partners that are here to support you, both in terms of market entry knowledge, understanding the market, financial support. There's a lot of support that is out there, and there is unbiased information shared by these organizations and support partners. So use the government support that you are getting, use the EU support, and find your way into India. The timing is now. Over and above the crisis that we are going through, the timing is now between 2020 to 2025. All of our presentations talked about that. And it's just about using this time as we have to develop that strategy for India. And EBTC and the other organizations are always here to support you. Thank you.
Thank you, Joel. That was good to know. So yeah, I mean, this brings us to the end of the session. This has been a wonderful session. And I'm sure our listeners have great takeaways from this session and will be able to use several of these pointers when working on trademarks for their businesses and IP. We have not been able to cover all the questions that we received from the audience. Those which could not be covered will be answered in the write ups which we publish post this webinar. Thank you, all these speakers. And as I already mentioned, Sagacious is offering free custom trainings for IP and R&D teams during lockdown as an initiative to support businesses during these times. The participants of these webinar can drop us an email on webinar@sagaciousresearch.com. I'll shortly post it in the chat box. You can get more information or you can request a custom training for your teams. Again, I want to extend a big thank you to all our listeners who helped us start on time and stayed with us for the extra 10 minutes. We highly appreciate that and thank you very much. Please join us in our next webinar. Have a great day ahead.